Yeah, I'm talking about that man, Jimmy Butler. Put the weapon on the Cavs, they some busters. I ain't gonna lie, LeBron, you's a baller. But Jimmy Butler is your father. Yeah, I'm talking about that man, Jimmy Butler.
Welcome to another edition of the post-game press conference. You can find us here on YouTube, Spotify, and even the post-game media website. That's where you find every piece of sports content myself and my co-host do. I'm Ryan Pigeau alongside Jon Lodge, just over there. And this program is all about breaking down the recent advancements in the sports world. Of course, the NHL free agency just kicked off on Friday. That was yesterday. And earlier in the week, we had the draft. So that's on the top of our mind. But at the same time, we've got the NBA Finals in full swing. And the Miami Heat are staying alive, John. We'll talk about that, as well as the MLB. We've got our championship series all sorted out, and we're getting ready to drop some takes on that. So without further ado, John, welcome in, man. Welcome back to the post-game press conference. What do you want to talk about to start?
Oh man, it has been a week. It's been a week of really good sports content. We're in the championship series now for baseball, and Game 5 just took place in the NBA Finals. But you know what? You shouldn't start off on a bleak note, but It's kind of looking like a bleak future to me in the world of the sports landscape, because we're coming to a close from all of this content that we have been watching, and then eventually all we're going to be left with is Saturday night UFC and Sunday and Thursday and Monday football. That's what
I've never been a bigger NFL fan in my life, and I'm already starting to project how much more into the NFL I'm going to get this season, which for somebody who does a radio show and a podcast, that's obviously good for me, right? I'd like to get better at every sport, but you're right, man. Like with all these kind of dying down, and we have finally learned that the NHL is kind of aiming to start around, was it January 1st? They were hoping to get their new season going. So we at least have a little
league year.
Yeah.
We have to be open about that. That's the league year. People are thinking that Gary Bettman's saying puck drop on January 1st, but what that means is the league year will open up January 1st. We'll get guys in training camp, and we'll get a preseason sort of going, and they might start the season in mid-February. They don't want to start in March, but the big key for the NHL is fans, right? And Unfortunately, I don't see anything being able to be done in the realm of getting fans in buildings to create revenue. So I don't know where the NHL can go with that, but once they accept that they're not going to have fans in, then they'll get started sooner rather than later.
Yeah, fans, a totally separate issue on its own. It's unfortunate that we have to deal with that too. But in the end, it's just the fact that we are getting a little bit of information. We know that these leagues are not going to take a massive break like we saw maybe happen back in March. But at this point, you're right. Like, we're going to have all these major sporting events, all these things that we've been dialed into night after night kind of finally wind down. And we have a lot to talk about in terms of off season, but yes, the NFL will be the only thing really going, and the UFC, which you do your own show on, and it'll be a big story for you every weekend to be able to talk about the fight nights and all that.
Oh yeah.
But before we really get into any of that kind of stuff, I want to ask you here, what do you think of Tom Brady the other night? He kind of had a bit of a meltdown, and people are talking about maybe the early season woes in Tampa Bay, and how this might not play out the best for Tom. I want your take before we move into hockey, because we might not have a lot of time to talk NFL this week.
Well, my tweet said it all on Thursday night. Tom had a little bit of an Alzheimer's moment and fits right into the retirement community in Florida, forgetting what down and distance it was, and decided to rifle it to try and get 20 yards when he only needed to dump it off to Ronald Jones, who had an excellent game of over 100 yards rushing plus receiving yards on top of that. He would have been able to get that first down and kept going, but he forgot what down it was, and he apparently was the only one. And I don't know if this is true or not, but from what I've heard, he was told in the locker room he didn't have Bill to carry him anymore. So he has to realize where he's at. So Tom, showing his age a little bit, it happens to the best of them. But no one ever expected it to happen to number 12, to TB12. We saw age take its toll there. I did want to talk about one thing before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to get into.
I just thought that was an interesting thing there. I just thought it was interesting because you're a Pats fan, and I wanted to spring that on you before we get into hockey, because I really wanted your take. I did see the tweet, but I thought I'd get your expansion on that real quick.
It was definitely interesting to watch that, but I heard an interesting take. And okay, so people take vacations, right, Ryan?
Oh yeah,
Obviously.
all the time.
Now, I heard, I don't know if this is a feasible thing to do, but would you take a vacation inside an NHL bubble if it required you to buy tickets to 2 weeks worth of games and quarantine for a week previous before you got into the bubble?
Do I get paid for this vacation too? We sound like
No, sir.
we have an ad going here. Okay, what's going on here? You're leading me down this path, but I'm not quite sure where we're headed.
Well, I mean, I went down the rabbit hole of Twitter and tried
Yeah.
to figure out how the sports organizations, at least in closed arenas, will be able to get fans, because the NFL has gotten fans in, and so has the MLB for their playoffs. And this is one concept that, or well, the only concept that really, not that it makes a lot of sense, but made any sense whatsoever to me in how they could get fans in the buildings. And that's the only way to do it is to have the fans quarantine and then have them stay there for a certain block of time until other fans come in and quarantine. It sounds ridiculous. It does. But if
Yeah, it
NHL
does.
wants fans, this is the only probable way to do it, is it not?
I guess so. For a minute, I thought you were talking about there's like an ongoing contest in some of these radio shows, like whatever. It's like a Budweiser that's sponsoring it, and you can the Bud Bubble, and you go and you get paid to go watch sports and hang out in
I'd
the
love
bubble.
that.
But again, you essentially get paid to go, and somebody brought it up on one of the shows I listened to. It was like, well, what about if you had COVID? Like, do you have to have a COVID positive or negative test to get into the bubble? Imagine you win and then you've got COVID, so you can't go. So I thought you were talking about that, but yeah, man, the bubble is going to be an interesting issue no matter what, no matter what kind of avenue you go down. I never thought about vacationing in there, but whatever floats your boat, right? If you're a diehard sports fan, sometimes that's what you get where your satisfaction comes from. I don't know. I really don't know.
I don't know if Joe Blow has the money to buy 2 weeks worth of NHL
No,
tickets,
I
especially
don't
if you're a
think so.
fan of the Maple Leafs. It's
What
not like
kind of
you're going to
person
pay
really
to go to
does?
the Ottawa Senators. Could you imagine having to pay like $15,000 for tickets to the Maple Leafs for 2 weeks? That would be insane. I mean, go put a down payment on a house. Don't be
The amount of
watching hockey
times
games.
this team shuts it down and it'll let you down for a 2 week stretch, like that's my luck. I'd spend $15K just to watch them go on a 6-1
2 week
or
losing
1-6 streak. Yeah, they'd pull out one win in overtime or something, and the rest of it would just be a shit show for 2 straight weeks. But let's get into it, man. We're talking NHL. We might as well drop the hammer. Right before we started recording the podcast, we got some really good news. It actually pumped me up a bit because in free agency, especially around the Maple Leafs, we were discussing kind of what Dubas was going to do to put his money where his mouth was and actually address the needs. And as we saw yesterday, two big signings in Toronto. Number one was Wayne Simmons. That was a big one on a 1-year cheap deal, $1.5 million, exactly what Corey Perry got last offseason. You saw the kind of contributions he was able to give for the Dallas Stars late in the playoffs. So even just something on that kind of deal, you're looking for great value, and I think that's what you got. And then the more important one, addressing the defense, was TJ Brody, which we'll have some heavy takes on. But like I said, honestly, right before I hit the record button, you hit me with Elliot Friedman's tweeting that Zach Bogosian signs in Toronto for 1 year, $1 million. And I couldn't be happier, man, because I think that's the third signing in this free agency that's really going to start, like I said, kind of showing that Kyle Dubas is ready to put his money where his mouth is. Not only is it a really cheap 1 year, $1 million deal, but it's that kind of defenseman you can see slotting into that third right-hand side role to either play with a Sandin or a Dermott if the Leafs end up re-signing him. But now you're looking at the Leafs defense core with these two signings in TJ Brody and Zach Bogosian, and wondering if maybe Dubas actually is finally kind of seeing that some balance being inserted into the lineup is what's necessary. What's your initial take on this before we get into the signings across the rest of the league? Because us as Leaf fans, this is big news to us.
So in regards to TJ Brody, this is a guy they brought in to play on the top pair, in my opinion. He's played with Mark Giordano, for a majority of his career over there in Calgary, and so he knows what it's like to play top pairing minutes. He's played with a very strong D pair, obviously with Gio. So there may be a little bit of a drop off in Toronto with who he's paired with. Hopefully not, depending on who they decide to go with. I've heard varying ideas of him being paired with Riley, but the pairing that might stand out, that might mean the most, is him with Muzzin, possibly because of the ability of Muzzin to shut down and how much Muzzin actually similarly parallels Giordano's game. Right. So it'll be less of a drop off for Brody to be paired with Muzzin than it would be for him to be paired with Riley. Not saying Riley is a bad defenseman, it's just so much of a different style. In regards to Bogosian, man, my biggest takeaway from this is in a market where they could have gone out and overpaid for an Alex Petrangelo, Kyle Dubas said, hit the brakes. No, we've done this overpaid nonsense before. We're going to go out and we're going to spend our money sensibly and properly. And they went and spent $1 million on Bogosian, $5 million on Brody, and $1.5 million on Wayne Simmons, who's not a defenseman, but do not overestimate his ability to be effective on a third or fourth line in a defensive checking role. This guy can score, but this guy can shut things down. So I think Kyle Dubas has everyone has speculated, has reassessed his definition of toughness, and he's gone out there and he showed Leaf Nation exactly what his definition is now.
I think you made a good point there too, in terms of people were saying that Pietrangelo was going to get it probably around $8.5 to $9 million on this open market on a 7-year deal. You look at the $7.5 million combined that the Leafs have just spent in one day, with only one of those contracts extending past this season. Very little risk on there. We've been looking for a defenseman to play with Morgan Rielly for quite some time. It's starting to get a little bit ridiculous. Now, as much as I say that, we also talk about bringing in Zach Bogosian and how well Morgan Rielly paired with Ron Hainsey as well. So as much as I do ideally want to see Rielly and Brody play together, that's what a training camp and early season is there for, to kind of get your chemistry going. So I could almost see, just like kind of people are already touching on, maybe a Muzzin Brody like number one shutdown pairing that would play against your heavier competition, the number one line on the opposition, whereas then you could play Rielly with a Bogosian, similar to the way he's always played with a lesser counterpart. And that's the thing where I kind of struggle with that, because I'd love to see Rielly actually play in a top pairing role with a top pairing guy, which there's a potential for it. Again, there was potential when Muzzin came in and that didn't work out, right? So I can understand where we're constantly trying pieces in different spots, but because Brody plays the right side and he prefers to, you're looking at a top four of like Rielly, Muzzin, Brody, and Justin Hall, the way that he kind of proved that he can handle those minutes, at least when he's playing with the right partner. And then you kind of extend that down to the third pairing, knowing that Rasmus Sandin has really taken a step to prove, and another off season, and the experience he gained with his limited minutes, but his NHL experience there. I have a funny feeling that you're going to pair Bogosian with either this Mikko Lehtinen, who's had a standout start to his season in the KHL, or with a Sandin, and Travis Dermott is going to be the odd one out here now, right? The guy that amongst him and Mikko, I wanted to say Mikko, his name's Mikheyev, but his first name escaped me for a second there. Holy smokes, what's his name? Ilya Mikheyev. I don't know why that was so difficult. But when it comes down to it, those are your two RFAs left to sign. I think Travis Dermott now, when you look at this defense core and Zach Bogosian entering the roster, I really think Dermott's probably the odd one out. Now, what do you think about that?
Oh, 100%. I have been actually on the Dermott walking train ever since this whole pandemic idea of making RFAs UFAs, because this was such an unheard of concept that didn't happen very often in the NHL. You always qualified your RFAs, and whether they got little money, you always had the AHL to bounce off of it, and there was always enough money to at least qualify these guys. But as soon as the idea of RFAs turned UFAs came out, I was on the train to have Dermott walk out of Toronto, because he's just not the guy that he was advertised as. Is he a decent pairing defenseman? Sure, but we're not looking to pay him the money that he's looking to get as he sees himself as a top four guy, and the Leafs see him as maybe a seventh defenseman or sixth at best. So I think you're going to see Travis Dermott, given his walking papers, he's going to be going to another team as an unrestricted free agent, or traded in a deal where the Leafs try to shed a little bit more cap or get a little bit more cap space. I don't think the Leafs are done yet. I think that Kyle Dubas has proven that he is intent on terraforming the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's intent on changing them in such a way that they're almost unrecognizable to the Toronto Maple Leafs that they have been the past couple years. And Travis Dermott is just a problem that he's not going to want to have anymore. I think that you might even see a guy like Alex Kerfoot moved out, and who gets plugged into that third center role, I don't know. But the Leafs are looking to strip down on salary right now and gain some cap space to bolster their defense. They've definitely bolstered it with TJ Brody Fleury, and now the addition of Zach Bogosian. But I just got a feeling in my gut, Ryan, that more moves are yet to come here, and Travis Dermott just isn't in the mix for the Toronto Maple Leafs anymore.
Couple of things there too. Like, it pains me to say that I watched Dermott play as an Erie Otter. He came to Peterborough a couple of times, and it just, the timing worked out. My buddy and I, we kept going and watching him as a junior, knowing he was a Maple Leaf prospect. And then to see him over the past couple of years, like, you see those flashes of where he really could be, you know, he could separate himself from just an average defenseman in the league. He's not necessarily a soft guy to play against. He doesn't have a lot of size, but you don't notice that on the ice, right? He does seem to have a big compete level, and that's going back to what Kyle Dubas said earlier in the week. Like, to let that guy go when you're also saying you want to be tougher to play against, like, those two things don't always go hand in hand when you see him on the ice. Like, Travis Dermott has been decent, but he just hasn't, I guess when you listen to a lot of the pundits, hasn't really made the step to command a lot of money, and he's almost in a position where you can't make somebody else expendable to pay him any money because he's not worth much. And what the minimal amount, it's not going to be worth, I guess, trying him out. Like, the issue for me is you don't want to see a Travis Dermott walk or not get a value back on a trade, and then have him be a piece that you search for, because I don't put him in the same category as a Jake Gardiner, where we were happy to see him walk in free agency. Now he was older and we'd seen much more of the same stuff from him, but that's where my point on Dermott is. Like, it does pain me to see him go, and maybe in an ideal world, Dubas is able to kind of make some moves and keep him around, and keep essentially challenging him in the lineup to earn the maybe top 4 minutes. Maybe he could always have the opportunity to push Justin Hall out of that top 4 role in this upcoming season. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to demean the skills of Travis Dermott whatsoever, but it just seems as though with his left-handed shot and the fact that each season he hasn't really taken that extra jump to really force you to make the move, he's going to be the odd one out. So that's where I want to give him his credit where it's due. Like, I love Travis Dermott, but might be better off in another destination. As well as Andreas Janssen, he was kind of a chippy guy too, and we saw him get moved earlier today. His $3.4 million gets shipped out the door to the New Jersey Devils for Joey Anderson. Anderson is, I forget his exact age, but he's in the final year of his entry-level deal, $925,000 deal, so a cheap one. And yes, he's a guy that's going to have to get re-signed as well, but in 52 career games, he's only got 13 points. So I don't see him being an issue if Dubas does run into having to re-sign him, and I really don't see that being a roadblock for the cap down the road. So essentially the $3.4 million for, I think it was 3 more years that Janssen had on the books, is cleared off. And as we see much later in the day, he's able to sign Bogosian for $1 million. I haven't pulled up Cap Friendly to see exactly how this all slots in, but I have a funny feeling there is going to have to be 1 or 2 more moves. And that's where you bring up Kerfoot. And I think he's a smart candidate to essentially shop, just because he would have value to some teams. He does have value to the Leafs as well. Like, they do need center depth if they're going to compete. But at the same time, with him being signed to around $3 million and the way that the money is allocated in Toronto, you really have to do your best to get the value out of those bottom 6 guys. So if you can get a cheaper guy to replace Alex Kerfoot, then essentially that money would be out the door too. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that, man. Number one, Dermott, got to give him all the credit that he's deserving, because a great player. Just in this situation, the way the Leafs are shaking out, he really seems to not have enough to force Justin Hall off of that pairing. And again, the money isn't just going to be enough for him to be worth it. What do you think on that, man?
In regards to Dermott walking and turning into something, I think this has burned the Leafs in the past because the Leafs have had a lack of success of their own. So, with Cronwall, et cetera, the guys you've seen go to the Tampa Bays, or like with Strawman and whatnot, right? These guys who the Leafs had, and they went and developed elsewhere into really, really good defensemen. I think that if the Leafs have some sort of sustained success with letting Dermott walk, then that will make him possibly becoming something a little bit more palatable, right? Because you can say, yeah, good for him. He needed a change of scenery. He wasn't good enough here, but he became good enough elsewhere. But we became good by letting him go elsewhere, right? So it's almost addition by subtraction in this way. But I don't think Travis Dermott will wash out of the NHL. I just don't think he fits on this team. I think that he's a small skilled defenseman, and the Leafs have enough small skilled defensemen, as is evident with Kyle Dubas's signings now getting much bigger on the defensive core, right? So
Yeah.
I don't mind losing Travis Dermott, and I don't mind him being good elsewhere, so long as the Toronto Maple Leafs are successful as well.
So we can both agree that there's probably a few more moves to come, but we like the Wayne Simmons signing, we like the Brody signing, we like the Janssen trade, we like the Bogosian signing. There's not a lot of things we don't like at this point, right? Things are kind of looking like, again, as we said at the top, Dubas has seemingly put his money where his mouth is and put things in a different direction than we've seen in the last couple of years. Can that be agreed upon? I think we're in the right track here.
I think you can look at this offseason so far as the most successful offseason that Kyle Dubas has had as a general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Dropping a hot take there. We got to see it on the ice. We got to see it on the ice, right? Because who knows if Simmons has lost a step? Who knows if Bogosian's lost a step? You've seen lots of guys say, well, it's convenient that we're reneging on the Pietrangelo deal when TJ Brody is of the same age and has shown the same offensive regression over the past 2 seasons that a guy in his 30s or kind of hitting the end of his prime would. So you're seeing a lot of people immediately show negativity, but like I said to you, I think for the first time in a while, and I mean, you're taking it definitely a step further, which I appreciate. It's just for the first time in a while, we're finally seeing maybe Dubas kind of show a little bit of balance in his philosophy, right? Because he keeps saying this, and this, but then really not doing it. And then that's where you saw a lot of the fan base get upset with the way he drafted players once again this year, which between you and I, John, like we know they're not immediate impact players. So if you're going to go and draft the best player available each time you're up, that's a whole nother conversation. But there was a big debate in Leafland. I just think it links back to Dubas and his philosophy, right? A lot of people took the way he drafted earlier in the week and said, look at this guy. He keeps saying he's going to do one thing and then he turns around and does another. It's elite trolling. But I do think over the last 48 hours, we've seen him in signing some of these difficult players to play against, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He isn't just kind of giving the fan base lip service, Uncle Rick and Uncle Steve up in North Bay. He isn't just giving them lip service. He's finally kind of showing a little bit of balance while still trying to keep that core together that he's so proud of. Like, good for Kyle. I'm a Leaf fan, and I think sometimes my tweets, people would maybe think I'm not, right? They think I'm a Dubas hater, but I like to see both sides of it, and I'm a natural-born cynic. I've been watching these Leafs for a very, very, very long time. So, I mean, people would probably assume I'm not a fan of this team. You got to be hard on the things you love.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the fact that Frederik Andersen is staying put in Toronto. And we have been a proponent of Frederik Andersen staying put in Toronto. And when you see the likes of Braden Holtby, Anton Khudobin, Henrik Lundqvist, et cetera, Jakob Markstrom, all of the goaltenders.
The Markstrom deal. Check out that Markstrom deal, John. 6 years at $6 million. What's Freddie Andersen going to get at free agency? I thought he was going to get $10 million.
The thing is Markstrom is a lot younger as well too. So you would have. I think Markstrom. No, maybe not. I'm sorry. I'm probably thinking about Demko. Thinking about Demko.
I just wanted to stop you there because the first thing I saw when Markstrom signed a 6-year, $6 million deal, I thought, dude, Freddie Andersen makes 5. Like he's going to get $1 million and a half raise. What's the issue here?
There's no problem with giving Frederik Andersen $1.5 million raise and making him a $6.5 million goaltender. There never was a problem with Frederik Andersen in Toronto. Nope. What he needed was a proper defensive core to shape around him and insulate him. We've said that over and over again, and Kyle Dubas said as much. He said he's talked to Freddie leading up to the free agent. He had talked to Freddie. Frederik Andersen knew the direction of the Toronto Maple Leafs were in. He shared all of the trade calls that would have had possibly involved him in it. So he was as open of a book as he could have been with his goaltender. And I believe Kyle Dubas 100% going through this, that Frederik Andersen was going to be the starting goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs for the 2020-21 season. And he just needed to reshape the defense around him. Biggest takeaway for me is not moving off of your possible franchise goaltender. This is the guy who people were after for a reason. If people are knocking on your door for the goaltender that the media is saying is out the door, then you know there's value there. you know there's enough value there that
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
you should probably keep this guy.
John, we said it from the start. Like, this guy doesn't grow on trees. If you can go out and get Markstrom in free agency, fine. But you're not going to really have my respect for just moving on from a guy like Anderson and not actually addressing your real issue. Again, there was an entire half of a fan base going, yeah, it's time to move on from Freddie. And I'm like, are you guys absolutely kidding me? You realize like you're just picking the low hanging fruit. Yeah, you might have let in a couple soft goals in big games, but the defense in front of him, like, you absolutely cannot blame a goaltender for that. We kept bandying about this idea that maybe if you just address the defense, give Freddie another chance, he might prove that he's a top 10 goalie once again. He might actually flourish in this market instead of being the butt of all jokes. And in the end, here we go. We've actually got, I think some of those people are disappointed to see Freddie still here, but in my mind, they've gone ahead and they've actually done the hard work. If you think well, Dubas was making all these moves in the background, he also had the ability to shop and swap Freddie Anderson for a better goaltender on a cheaper deal. You're daydreaming. The fact that he was able to keep Freddie and get TJ Brody, Wayne Simmons, and now Bogosian to add to the defense core. At this point, I'm a little bit more confident in this team going into next season, knowing that they've got Freddie Anderson and they've got what looks like a potentially competent decor. Now, it's going to be on Sheldon Keefe to actually implement that system that's going to allow a guy like Brody and Bogosian to actually make impacts on their lines. But you think now, if you put Brody with Riley, you've got Muzzin with Hall, and you've got Bogosian with Blank, that's a guy on every pairing. That's a guy on every pairing. That's the entire 60 minutes. I'm not sure if that math works out to some out there who aren't quick with math. But if you've got one of those guys on every single pairing, they play the entire game. Okay? So I have a funny feeling that those three guys are going to make an impact. We've already seen what Muzzin can do, right? So you give Freddie Anderson one more season here in front, like behind this decor, and I have a funny feeling a lot of the haters are going to turn real quick. But I mean, we said it from all along. If you were picking on Freddie Anderson, you really didn't really know much about building a team, because we've got one of the top 10 goalies in the league here, just sitting in our hands, and people were considering shopping him. It's hilarious.
Yeah, just by sheer size, volume of shots faced, save percentage, his stats don't really go down from regular season to playoffs. What happens is the games get tighter, other teams start playing harder, and the Leafs collapse.
The
That's
style
what's
of
happened
hockey
year after
changes.
year.
The whistle gets put away. The teams that are softer get exposed, and the goaltender has to bail them out game in and game out. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a soft goal by Liam Foudy when Martin Marincin is standing there pushing L1 in your crease while you're trying to decide whether I have to read for a one-timer across crease or just read the shot. Apparently that's your fault. You know what I mean? Now Martin Marincin may never wear a Leaf jersey ever again. And at this point, I couldn't
Martin
be happier.
Marincin may never wear an NHL jersey again.
And again, this is nowhere near Travis Dermott, but let's give Marty the credit where it's deserved, because it's been brought up millions of times. He's just happy to be in the NHL. He could like, apparently he's loved by the guys in that dressing room, because it's like, hey, Marty's back in the lineup. Let's play for Marty. Like, apparently they loved that guy and loved playing for him. So give him the credit where it's due. Hopefully he never puts a Leaf jersey on again. But also, thank God, Tyson Barrie, who signed a deal in Edmonton, will never be putting on a Leaf jersey again. And Cody Ceci will never be putting on a Leaf jersey again. We've got Zach Bogosian and TJ Brody to replace them. Not only that, but as I mentioned earlier, it's Lehkonen and Travis, oh my gosh, Rasmus Sandin. So we've got a lot of good kind of conversations ahead of us when it comes to the defense. I think we'll shelve it there, because we got to hear a little bit more takes and maybe see some on-ice play before we really start to get in love with them. But before we move on to the actual rumors and takes of where Pietrangelo's headed, OEL, those kinds of things, the draft, there's one selection that everybody's disappointed in, and it was this Amarov kid. John, I want your quick take on it, because I think I kind of mentioned what I felt a little earlier on when I said you draft the best player available. What do you think, though? Do you have any differing takes or things you want to add to that before we move on to the rumors?
Well, I know Kyle Dubas had said that trade fell through. That's why they took so long to make that pick. But they said that whether they had traded the pick or whether they were keeping the pick, it was always Amarov. I don't know much about him. I do know that he's 3 years away from playing for any team. You know what? You talked to my sister. I said 3 years away before Carlo even opened his mouth.
I just think it's funny when you said I don't know much about him. That's what got Carlo in a lot of trouble, by saying I don't know much about him and then blank. And you had people jump down his throat, say you should have shut up then. You should have stopped there. And it's like, you don't know a thing about him either. Like, I'm so sick and tired of Leafs Twitter. Some of these accounts with 3,000 followers that just spew out garbage. and then get validated by each other's own hockey Twitter account. It's actually disgusting to watch sometimes. Sorry.
Yeah. I just I had a feeling on draft day, and I haven't changed my feeling. The Leafs might trade this guy. There was a trade that was going to happen. This was the consensus guy who was going to go 15, right? So if the team who was going to trade for the pick was going to pick the kid anyway, then possibly there is still a trade that you could pick up later on to the date that includes that kid. I don't know, but personally, it's not really on my mind. I think the NHL entry draft for the Toronto Maple Leafs was a secondary thought. It was always free agency. It was always about Friday and what they were going to do Friday and beyond Friday. It's nice to restock the cupboard and get a goaltender prospect and get some defense prospects and like I said, restock the shelves. But personally, in my opinion, what the Maple Leafs were looking forward to was the Friday period of free agency and rebuilding the NHL-ready team to make another run, because the Leafs know that they have a good team. They know that they have the skill to put pucks in the net. They just have to get that grit and that determination and that drive that Tampa Bay showed. They were able to tap into and win the Stanley Cup in probably one of the hardest tournaments to win it in.
Speaking of Tampa Bay, real quick, I was happy to see Maroon finally got his 2-year deal. He got to re-sign in Tampa Bay,
but only $900K.
That's fine. That's fine. He's been chasing that kind of deal with term for a little while, and I think he deserved it after winning a back-to-back cup. I'd say Tampa Bay, of any team, is poised to win another cup, right? Like, if of any team on paper right now heading into the next season, whenever it starts, like Pittsburgh a couple of seasons ago, they might be one of the top teams in that tier with Vasilevsky, with the decor they've got. They've still got all those forwards. And Stamkos, essentially, there's rumor here, this is a joke, but essentially he could be on the move. Now, that's so far-fetched, I don't see it happening. But if they do end up trading him, guarantees they're getting something ridiculous back that's going to impact them right away. So Patrick Maroon signing 2 years in Tampa Bay. Man, if you want to put a future bet on anything, Patrick Maroon being the first player in a while, if not ever, to win back-to-back-to-back Stanley Cups, that's almost an easy future bet to put some money on.
It would be interesting. Speaking about Steven Stamkos, though, I heard he underwent another core muscle surgery today. So I think we have to start having the conversation of, is this the end for Steven?
I won't go into that.
I understand what we saw in the playoffs. I understand we saw 2 minutes and 37 seconds.
We saw one goal.
Well, we saw 2 minutes and 37 seconds, and he made an impact, right? So it's a lot to say that Steven Stamkos' career might be over, but if he can't get over this core muscle injury, if it keeps requiring surgery and he keeps aggravating it and keeps making it worse and worse, he will never be the same Steven Stamkos again. He won't be worth the $8.5 million he's earning a year, and he is not an untouchable in Tampa right now. He's someone that could be traded from a team who has severe cap issues. So I think the question has to be had: is Steven Stamkos' career in jeopardy? In the same light as is Vladimir Tarasenko's career in jeopardy, because he's another guy who's had multiple surgeries on the same injury, and it's just not getting better.
I mean, I'll let you die on those hills. Like, if those guys end up retiring, I'll let that be your claim to fame. I'm not going to put my neck out on the line and say those guys could retire early just based on injuries, because you've seen a million guys.
LTIR, they won't retire. They just won't be playing.
I mean, Mario Lemieux came back from Hodgkin's lymphoma. Like, guys come back from anything. I understand these are serious injuries, like core muscles and shoulder surgeries, but I'm not willing to stake any take on a guy retiring early. Not until there's been like a larger speculation on it. But what I see is a really unique circumstance in Tampa Bay, where like Tampa, they just won a cup without their captain. So like, they don't need Steven Stamkos. Anybody telling me that they need him is batshit crazy. Like, you don't need the guy. But in sport, there's a lot of loyalty involved. And here's somebody who was drafted to a shit franchise and saw them rise from the dumps and win a cup essentially without him. Not only that, but we've discussed the amount of things he's missed out on. It really doesn't surprise a lot of us that he's lifting a Stanley Cup without really doing anything. Now, in it being a unique circumstance, I could understand if Tampa Bay is up against it and they consider his cap to be an issue, but they would have to go to this guy and really make the case to him why, you know, with all respect, they would need to move on from him, and he would have to basically be the facilitator of any deal. So I can see this being a larger story, maybe if there were like people coming out saying Stamkos doesn't want to go anywhere and essentially he's never returning because of the injuries too much. But for now, I just consider it a really unique situation where, like, again, you can't argue that Tampa Bay needs the guy, but he's the captain, and essentially it's his team. He calls the shots. Meanwhile, on the ice, it's really not his team. Like, he's more management than anything. You could almost see where, not like LeBron being the coach and player of his team. This is a very, very unique situation, and I think everything's on the table. So that's where I say it's a joke that he gets traded. But once that rumor starts picking up steam, we get maybe closer to the season and there's actually a conversation around it, then it'll be a big story. But for now, it's just a really confusing and unique situation to me.
If they were able to somehow remove Steven Stamkos' $8.5 million cap hit, it would solve every issue that Tampa Bay has, and they'd be able to keep the rest of the team as constituted. And they just proved that they could win a Stanley Cup without him, right? So
exactly,
it's something that could happen.
Yeah, it would completely solidify my point there. Them being in the running to be a back-to-back Cup winner. Imagine removing Stamkos' contract and just having money to play with too. That's not even fair. It's not fair.
And core muscle surgery tells me that he will probably start the season on long-term injury reserve, in my opinion. Maybe I did jump the gun a little bit on the career-ending injury headline, but who's to say he doesn't have a setback and have to have another surgery on the same core muscle, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? I am looking into the future, and this is a very difficult injury to get over. He definitely aggravated it in that 2 minutes and 37 seconds. And man, this is a game where you've got to push your body to such limits that things break, things snap. And you never know when it's going to happen. Steven Stamkos has earned enough money to be comfortable for the rest of his life. And who's to say, yes, he loves the game, but who's to say he wants to put his body through that?
Yeah, it's hard to say. A couple of more signings too. We've got Shattenkirk leaving the Tampa Bay Lightning, go to Anaheim. That's on a bigger deal too. 3 years at almost $4 million there. So he gets a bit of a payout after taking a shorter term deal, low risk, small money kind of deal in Tampa Bay. Again, they really got away with one there because this is what Shattenkirk's always been worth: 3 years, $4 million. So again, he kind of gets his money there. And then another big one to talk about is Torrey Krug landing in St. Louis before Pietrangelo signs says a lot. Pierre LeBrun was on overdrive yesterday. And the funny thing is, I actually listened to the podcast. I didn't listen to it live, and I heard it after Torrey Krug signed in St. Louis. He almost let it slip. He actually said something along the lines of, there's a player that's like, if this completely directly affects, because the Pietrangelo decision is essentially like he either signs in St. Louis or he signs somewhere else. And he was talking about Torrey Krug. And then what he did is he said, and look at Torrey Krug, that's a name we haven't brought up yet. And it's very funny that he did that, because he essentially, when you listen back to it about 15 minutes after the trade, you realize he was leading on that he knew what was happening. He was essentially leading on that the player he hadn't talked about was Torrey Krug. So in the end, it's a 7-year deal at $6.5 million. That guarantees that Pietrangelo is not going back to St. Louis. Now, where is he headed, John? Tell me he's headed back to St. Louis.
Well, I have heard rumors recently that St. Louis just offered him an 8-year contract.
They can't do that.
Now, the only way they could do
that, man.
The only way they could do that is if Vladimir Tarasenko is on long-term injury reserve, or if they trade a big piece a la Colton Parayko.
They can't offer 8-year deals anymore. It's over now.
No, he can get an 8-year deal. Because he only can get re-signed to an 8-year deal, and I believe he's one of the last people who could do it.
Now that he's hit free agency, it's like the Tavares thing. You remember when Tavares didn't sign with the Islanders? The day that July 1st hit, he could only sign a 7-year deal. So he's only allowed to sign a 7-year deal with a team at this point, even if it's with St. Louis. He actually passed up on that opportunity by not re-signing before July 1 or October 10th.
I don't know where I read it from, but I read it today that they had offered him an 8-year contract after I heard the news that he was on a plane.
It might be a 7.
On a plane to Vegas. Now, I don't know, like, I was speculating, I was doing the math, I was on Cap Friendly, I was breaking things down and trying to figure out exactly how St. Louis would be able to fit this guy back in. and the only way they fit him in, like I said, is if Vlad is not coming back at least for a while, and they have him on long-term injury reserve and use it the same way the Leafs had used it for years, or if they had gotten rid of a Colton Parayko. Now, I don't see them wanting to get rid of Parayko because his future looks like he's going to be a number one defenseman, and he's on a pretty affordable $5.25 million contract, I believe. So the logic dictates that Pietrangelo is out of St. Louis because of the Krug signing, but you never know in this crazy world of sports what exactly could happen and when it could happen. Pietrangelo is putting a lot of thought into it, but right now he's on the strip, and he's being taken out on the town, I guess, by the Vegas Golden Knights crew, and see if they can get him to sign in there after they move the Paul Stastny contract. They definitely have the money to sign him. The more interesting angle for this, though, for me, is Krug. Ryan, did you hear Krug's comments?
No, I don't think I did.
So Torrey Krug commented after the signing in St. Louis, and he said that there was no contract offer from Boston. No contract offer for over a year, and the contract that was offered a year ago was taken off the table by the Bruins.
Well, that does not surprise me.
This is in direct contradiction to Don Sweeney, I believe that's the GM of the Boston Bruins, his comments saying that they had offered a 6-year deal to Torrey Krug to stay in Boston. So a little bit of he said in this situation.
It confuses me too, because the leading up to the 2 weeks here leading up to free agency, it was reported by a couple of people that Boston was going to be trading the rights of Torrey Krug. So like it was accepted that he wasn't offered a contract in Boston as far as I was concerned. Like at that point they had decided like we're trading the rights to Torrey Krug or he's gone. And that was, believe it or not, they were joking about it on Spit and Chicklets. Like Rear Admiral, the host there, was essentially saying he had a source, and it kept going over and over like, okay, well, when are the rights going to be traded? And some insider you are. But the facts remain, like it was pretty much a given that he wasn't offered a contract and wasn't re-signing in Boston. They were just waiting on apparently a trade that never happened. So it didn't surprise me that he was signing somewhere else, but to sign in St. Louis and before Pietrangelo, to me, the writing is on the wall that really with the two teams, they talked about Toronto and Vegas really being the two front runners. Obviously, there's other teams in the mix, but then you combine the idea that Stastny's contract was traded the night before free agency, and then reports that Vegas is shopping Marc-Andre Fleury's contract with the, I guess, proposal that they're going to retain half the salary. They're trying to move money out. So to me, the most logical destination for Pietrangelo is Vegas. Then you've got Leafs Twitter goofs saying, well, the reason he hasn't made his decision yet is because he wants to play in Toronto and there's no room for him here. Well, if you want to keep believing that, go ahead. And I will be the first to pat you on the back when you're correct. But at this point, the most logical thing is that Vegas will be signing Pietrangelo probably in the next 48 hours. I will be really surprised if that doesn't happen, I have to say.
Did the Leafs ruin the market for Pietrangelo?
Why do you say that? Because the 4-year, $5 million for a defenseman his age?
Well, no, because they took themselves out of it essentially, and so it's a one-man bid, right? So it's not like Pietrangelo can go back and be like, "Oh, but the Leafs," or "Oh, but
potentially,
this,"
potentially.
And now with Torrey Krug signing in St. Louis, if we assume that eliminates them, and with TJ Brody, Zach Bogosian, and money disappearing in Toronto, and that eliminates them, then who else is in the market for Pietrangelo? And if it's only Vegas, does that mean Vegas kind of caught a break here and might get him actually on a little bit of a better deal?
Potentially, but then you listen to every single Leaf article writer and Nylander's being traded, right? So maybe like you said, there's still room for Pietrangelo to come to Toronto. I just, in my mind, I think like we're discussing here, the most logical thing is it seems like all the other teams that were reported to be in the running have made their decisions. And the most surprising one, again, for me is not TJ Brody, because they threw him on a lot of lists for the Leafs to grab in terms of like an efficient, smart pickup instead of blowing their load on Pietrangelo. At this point, I look back and I say, like, the really surprising one to me is Torrey Krug signing before Pietrangelo and in place of Pietrangelo. That tells me that talks completely broke off and he's not going back there. Now it could make sense if they did want to move on from Parayko or did have the opportunity to put Tarasenko on long-term IR. That one I prefer to to side with, because who wants to move on from Parayko? I understand how important your captain and your top pairing defenseman is, but sometimes you have a future, and Parayko kind of fills out more check boxes at this point for your future than Pietrangelo does, right? In the end, though, again, just to recap, I think the most likely thing, and I'll be surprised if it doesn't happen, is he signs in Vegas around $8 million a year. Probably a 7-year deal. But again, I don't believe now that we've hit free agency, he can sign an 8-year deal. I believe just like any other year, that's been removed off the table. You cannot, because it's not an extension, right? The extension is what gives you the 8 years.
Yeah, I know he can't sign 8 years to another team. I was just under the assumption that he could still sign with 8 years to St. Louis. There's one other contract I really want to talk about. You hit on it a little bit earlier, and it's one that came down today, and it's the Barry contract at 1 year, $3.75 million, and it is a far cry from the $7 million that everyone said he was going to get in the offseason. But it's a 1-year deal, and it's to a team that does not have a power play quarterback. He slots in right where he fits in at home. He's an offensive defenseman, a winger who plays defense. We've said it, we've seen it. But in an off year, he still put up 40+ points, right? So if you can get him on a power play with Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Connor McDavid, I can only see good things for Tyson Barrie to be able to quarterback that power play and take advantage of it as much as he possibly can. And signing a 1-year deal puts him in a unique position to go back to the free agent market in a year where you're going to have a team in the Seattle Kraken with a lot of cap space, and they're going to want a power play quarterback.
Yeah, it's one of these. Is Clefbaum still in Edmonton, or is he injured? I believe he suffered he had
he's
surgery.
Injured.
It was a surgery that similar to Tarasenko, where they botched it, correct? Or they had him play through surgery too many times, and at this point he's on the IR. But if you look, you combine, he is injured. I'm looking on Cap Friendly right now. 27 years old. He's only making $4 million. He's been a key piece on the power play for them. So you look at them now bringing in Tyson Barrie. You've got Ethan Bear there, Darnell Nurse, Chris Russell, and Adam Larson. Even Caleb Jones had a decent season for them, only 23 years old. So defense in Edmonton has been similar to Toronto, where it's basically been Swiss cheese, and they've had, even though they've had pieces like Darnell Nurse and Adam Larson on that roster, which I think in Toronto that would be a luxury for us, right? We don't have those 6'4", 220-pound defensemen. Adam Larson 6'3", 210. Like, we don't have those guys. Edmonton's had both of those pieces and still not been able to put it together. But you throw in Tyson Barrie to that mix now, give him a bunch of power play time in place of Oscar Klefbom, and I think he'll probably have a better season at Edmonton than he did in Toronto. Mind you, they are still pretty hard on their guys there. So if he has even a lick of pressure and can't handle it, like he'll fall apart like a cheap fan in the wind. You know that.
So the final rumor, or not rumor, I should say, free agent I really want to talk about, free agent still. Where does Taylor Hall end up? Does Taylor Hall pull a Tyson Barrie and sign a 1-year deal to get back to free agency next year?
Yes. Yeah. I keep hearing that same report over and over. And the one team, you've probably heard this too, is he should go to Colorado on a 1-year deal, $2 million. Do it. Do it. Why wouldn't
they just moved out Zadorov as well? Did Colorado? So
Brandon Saad and Dennis Gilbert to Colorado. Thank you for reminding me. That was like earlier today, correct? For Zadorov and another defenseman. And the Blackhawks actually retain $1 million on Saad there too. So it's actually like a little bit of a cheaper deal coming back. But because I think Zadorov is a bigger ticket than most for his production. I think he's making $4 or $5 million.
I think it's like 4.5. But he's a big boy. He's a big boy who walks that line of should he hit him? Should he not hit him? He walks that dirty line.
He's a guy you've wanted in Toronto for a while.
As soon as I seen he was traded to Chicago, my head just sunk. And I mean, I understand the Leafs can't afford that guy on that deal, but he's exactly the that if you could take a mold of Zadorov's body and just fill it with like DNA and print a brand new human and put it in a Leaf jersey, that's what I would want.
Here, you simulate a couple years in NHL 20 or NHL 21 now. Simulate a couple years, and I love him to death, Jake Muzzin, but that contract when he's like 34, 35, I straight up move on from him and I bring in Zadorov. And that's, you know what I mean? That's the type of player where like you got your Riley, your Brody, your second pairing guy. as soon as Muzzin's a bit too old, not able to handle those minutes anymore, like a Zadorov is the kind of guy you bring in, right? Just a younger, similar guy, like a crusher, somebody you wind him up and you let him get suspended.
Wind him up, let him get suspended.
But
That's
I think
great.
that's good for the bigger free agent talk. We got Kyle Turris going to Edmonton too. That was probably a smart deal for Edmonton, but I don't know how much impact he's going to have. We really touched on most of the goalies. You said Lundqvist headed to Washington, Holtby to Vancouver, Markstrom to Calgary. So we did really discuss most of the deals, and the biggest ones that still remain would be Pietrangelo and Hall. So I think we've covered most of the NHL free agency, don't you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's
All right.
there's a pretty big playoff series going on over in another league. I think we should touch on next.
So
Right?
last night, Jimmy Butler went clutch in the fourth quarter again, right? I don't know what's better. Was his Game 5 performance to keep them alive better, or was his 40-point triple-double in Game 3 to really blow everybody's mind? What was your favorite performance of the two, just to start off like that? Because I don't think they belong here, but he's highlight reeling every other game to keep them alive.
You know, the initial thought I have when I watch Jimmy Butler do Jimmy Butler things for the Miami Heat is I see why Kawhi wanted him in LA. And this
Yeah.
guy, could you imagine this guy playing with Kawhi Leonard?
Oh.
Like that is a shutdown pair. That would be disgusting. So I'm so happy he turned Kawhi down and decided to go to Miami. And he's running his own team in Miami. He's got a bunch of guys around him who can make shots at the right time, but not make shots all the time. And he needs to be the guy that carries them through. And he has been that. There was a little video of him walking away from the press conference last night after he was done, and he looked like he could have used a walker to get back. That's how sore he was, and that's how much he's putting his body on the line. In regards to what's most impressive, one performance or the other, I think it's just a sum of all of it that's so impressive. I can't separate one or the other. I can definitely say for sure that without Jimmy Butler, the Miami Heat are nothing and they fall apart. There are a bunch of young guys who have no leader and have no direction. But with Jimmy Butler, he's able to focus it all. And there's going to be one key moment if the Miami Heat end up coming back and end up being able to put an end to this Lakers run in the playoffs. There's one moment that's going to stand in infamy, and that's when Jimmy Butler was screaming at his bench, "They in trouble."
Yeah, he finally turned it on and gave it to his own bench this time, right? Because the storyline earlier in the series was Jimmy's got himself into some trouble by lipping at LeBron. If we learned anything from the Last Dance documentary and how much LeBron emulates MJ, don't you give him anything to motivate him, because he's going to come out and absolutely destroy you and clown you and anything he can. So I thought it was awesome. And the way Jimmy Butler, and you mentioned this again, I think last pod, he is essentially the Kawhi of the Raptors last season, the way that the Miami Heat are built, just kind of the group that they have needing a Butler to kind of focus everything and get all those clutch drives, and essentially every play he made in the fourth quarter is the reason why they're there, because he like, it's all the decision making, right? It's like when to drive, when to play solid D, it's just the clutch free throw. Everything was magnificent. And so again, I can't guarantee that it's going to be a game 7 because it almost seems to be an every other game thing with Butler, right? Game 3 was heat, game 5 was heat, but you combine the contributions from him and Tyler Hero, like honestly, it's a recipe for entertainment. It might not be success, but it's definitely entertainment. And as much as I love LeBron and AD and this team, like this Lakers team, you look at the other side of the court and they're inspiring too. You watch them and I can understand why people love both of those players and that entire team. But I don't know. I think I'm pulling for the underdog, like most guys in a series like this, right? And you look at Jimmy Butler. My question to you, John, have we hit the point? Is he Jim Butler? Is it now Jim Butler?
No, he's forever Jimmy. I can't call him Jim Butler. I can
I
call
don't
him
know.
Rim Butler. I can call him Jam Butler.
Rim Butler works, but imagine looking back on this, telling your grandkids about the notorious series between LeBron James and Jim Butler. Like Jim Butler just sounds like
It sounds serious.
Yeah, more
but
serious.
Jim Butler also sounds like a serial killer or like a serial bomber. But I've been watching a lot of shows recently, so
that's for me. This is Jimmy's coming of age party. He's now graduated from little Jimmy on the block, the bully that he was, to a grown man, elder statesman Jim Butler, and don't mess with Jim because he'll take you down to the rim.
Don't mess with Jim. He gonna take you to the rim. Bam.
Boom.
No, this Bam Adebayo. I think the one of the big keys to the Miami Heat winning last night was a 3-point shot that really didn't make any sense to me. And I don't know if you
Jay
took in the
Crowder?
game last night, but no, it was Danny Green. Final drive. I
It's a
believe there
miss.
was
Big
10 or
miss.
15 seconds
Yep.
left on the clock, and you had LeBron drive, and Danny Green was so wide open.
Kind of corner,
There
maybe a
was,
little bit higher up on the arc. Yeah,
there
our
was
side.
literally no one around him. And then
Yep.
I look at where he took the shot, Ryan, and he took the shot in almost Steph Curry territory, 2 or 3 feet beyond the line. Nobody's around you. You've got 12 seconds on the clock. Take a step in.
Even as a Raptor, that was
line.
Van Vliet. Van Vliet could shoot those shots, not you, Danny. Yes, you can shoot clutch threes, but not from Van Vliet range. Even as a Raptor, that was his problem too.
Yeah, it was that's the biggest takeaway for me is the fact that Danny Green missed that shot, and he really misjudged his distance. If he takes a step and a half into that line,
yeah,
it's in. Because if you look at where the ball hit, it hit front rim, and 1 or 1.5 steps in, that's a swish. So I just a misjudge by Danny Green, and with that basket, that would have put the Lakers up 2. So we would have been going to overtime.
Well,
as opposed to
wasn't that followed by the kind of the botched rebound? It ended up out of bounds, something like that, and then Harrell ends up on the line down the other way. There's no time left at that point, but I believe
no. What happened there was Butler. They got the ball back. Butler drove, got the lead,
bad
right,
foul.
And they were up by 1.
Yeah,
they were up by 1, and they drove. And Morris threw the ball away. Over top of Davis and threw it out of bounds, and then they inbounded and they fouled Hero with a second point, 1.6 seconds left, and there were no timeouts left for the Lakers and no time on the clock to do anything. So it was a great game for the Miami Heat and a great night for Jon Lodge.
Amazing basketball.
Because I won $200.
Oh, there you go. Johnny's betting and winning. That's like what we like to hear here. Awesome. Well, yeah, obviously a good entertaining basketball game is one thing, but when you're making dough on it too, you can't be, honestly, you couldn't be happier. Did you see the guy, speaking of making money on a Heat game, that completely had his heart ripped from his chest in that viral video? What was it? Promises answered, promises made. And Tyler Hero hits the shot with like 1 second left. Hits a 3. I think it was a 9-point spread that the Lakers were going to win by. And that's what his money was on. Dude, it was the funniest thing. This complete degenerate gets his heart pulled out of his chest right there in the middle of a recording. So.
The funniest thing I guess I didn't see that video, and it's not the funniest thing, but I found it hilarious. As I was reading earlier in the day, I believe it was Skip Bayless. He said, and don't take my word on it, it might not have been Skip, but there was a loudmouth American sports personality who said, I guarantee you, Lakers win by 20.
Ooh.
Are you kidding me? Do you know what team they're against?
Yeah.
Obviously, like the Miami Heat can play defense.
Yeah, and they don't go out without a fight either. Like they could be down by 20 at half. It's not going to end that way. Honestly, it ain't. This is a different team than most. This team does not pack it in.
It's not going down that way.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the Heat's odds of making it to 7 games?
Again, I'm just going to go with my gut here. They seem to kind of have it in them every other game. And unfortunately, like Game 5, they had it in them. I feel like Game 6, I thought LeBron was going to take it to them then, and I mean he's got another chance to do it. You can never bet, I don't think, against LeBron and the Lakers. I'm going to have to say it's over in 6. It's just the way like my betting heart would go. Even though how much have we talked? We barely talked Lakers this entire time. The Heat are amazing. They're a great story. You got to bet against them at this point.
And I guess I tend to agree. It's hard to bet against the Lakers. I have bet against them, but only because I get a point spread favorite for the Heat.
I mean, sometimes it's worth it.
But the big point for me here, and my big takeaway from the Lakers side is Anthony Davis healthy? He went down in a severe heap in a moment in the first half where Frank Vogel had to use a timeout because he could not walk to his sideline because he had such a bad bruise on his ankle. And that bruises that are that deep do not go away in 2 days, Ryan, especially when you are aggravating them and you're running and you're jumping and you're landing on it and you're not allowing it to heal properly.
Not even with
my
CPG?
key here depends. But my key here is drive on Davis. Drive on Davis.
Expose that,
make
man.
him work that ankle. Expose that ankle. Make him punish that ankle. And maybe if you can get number 3 out of the game, and it's all LeBron and just a couple of guys like KCP. KCP was huge last night. He was he was hitting triple after triple after triple, but that's not his. He doesn't do that every single game.
He was unreal in Game 4, I think, too, though.
Yeah, in the same way, Marcus Smart is unreal for the Boston Celtics, but not consistent for the Boston Celtics, right?
Exactly.
He does it one out of 3 games or 1 out of 5 games. KCP, the same thing. 1 out of 3 games, he shows up and he gives you that kind of performance. You need that every single game. You got that last game. What's to say you're going to get it this game from guys like Caruso and Danny Green? They're not carrying the water for you. I think that Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler have gotten under Dwight Howard skin as opposed to Dwight Howard getting under their skin. So I really think that the Miami Heat have the competitive advantage on the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm going to say it goes 7. I'm going to go one further. Jimmy Butler, MVP, Miami Heat, your NBA champions.
See, this is where betting is so hard because I just said all that, and like, how do you bet against Butler doing what he can do, right? Like, who's to say he doesn't put it all out on the floor one more time and force a Game 7? And you mentioned big men that are injured. Adebayo started this series on the bench. He didn't play Game 1 or Game 2, I want to say.
I don't think he played Game 1, 2, or 3.
Oh, get out of here!
Honest.
So
he played 4 and 5.
There you go. So like the fact that Adebayo is contributing the way he has, that just goes to show you, hey, even if Anthony Davis is injured, sometimes like you can still get through that. But the timing is everything. So hey, if they can get exposing him in Game 6, and if Adebayo is essentially continuing to play like this, he doesn't look injured. Even though like you'd think a guy that missed the first couple of games of the series is gonna maybe look like Stamkos out there. No, he looks fine. He looks fine. So again, it's hard to bet against either team, and there's a reason why I don't bet, because it doesn't matter, dude. It doesn't matter what I tell you, it's gonna be wrong. I just gave you both sides of it, and I'm still gonna be wrong.
You know what? I talk about winning, but I'm going to tell you, man, betting is hard. I lose a lot of money, and not a lot of money, but I lose a lot of times, and so it does feel good to win. But yeah, betting is a hard game. So I respect you for not getting involved in that, because you can get into a hole real quick.
Who are you betting on between the Rays and the Astros?
See, I took the Rays and I took the Heat to stay within 7, and that's what won me $200. I just looked at Tyler Glasnow starting. The Rays have been able to hit Garrett Cole, and I just believed in the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, in the 5th inning when they were down 1-0, I was like holding my breath, and I couldn't believe that the Rays were unable to get a single hit against Garrett Cole. They had the bases loaded in the 1st inning, and they didn't have a hit against the man. So I was a little bit worried, but then you had Mr. Meadows step up and just hammer one, and Aaron Judge, this picture is going to live in infamy. I don't know if you've seen it, but Aaron Judge gets all the way to the back of the wall, and he thinks he's going to make this catch, and he jumps up and he smashes the top of his head off the wall and just lands. No. Like it was just a hilarious. Like he didn't hurt himself, but it was just a hilarious picture where he jumped and he went up about an inch, hit the wall, and fell down, and the ball soars out. So that one and the Brasso home run.
The Brasso one, that 10-pitch at bat. I think, have I said this to you? Aroldis Chapman is my favorite baseball player. I don't know why. It's the stance, it's the look, it's the quiet demeanor, it's the size of the guy. When he finishes a pitch and he just kind of stares down the ump like, what's the call? I love the guy. That Brasso home run gave me chills, man. That was unreal. 10-pitch at bat. It's like 100 mile an hour down low, and he cranks it, and it's just barely over the wall. That was beautiful. And then, I mean, that's the game, right? 2-1. That's it.
Yeah, that was a frozen rope. He didn't know if it was out. Brasso said
no.
He knew it felt good, and that he thought he got it, but he had to see it go out.
Well, you could see him. He was rounding first. He was pointing at the dugout or the dugout, like oh. And then you
Yeah.
see the
And then you
eruption on
see him
his
just,
face.
yeah, the eruption. He was so happy to hit that. You know, more than one thing happened on that home run. His Wikipedia bio changed too. I don't know if you got to take a look at Mike Brasso, but he got a little bit of an addition.
Yeah.
Apparently, he's now Aroldis Chapman's dad.
I'm sick and tired of their feud. It's honestly not very long it's happened, right? But they broke it down in yesterday's game. I think Chapman threw over his head earlier in the season. And
101-mile-an-hour pitch over his head.
I will say, like that, I kind of don't have a lot of respect for that, even though I just said to you, honestly, the presence of Chapman on the mound. I remember even watching him as a Cincinnati Red and being like, he looks unreal in every jersey. It's kind of weird. Like, he literally looks intimidating out there. Obviously it's the size, but yeah, that's wrong. You don't throw that kind of speed at somebody's head. You're gonna kill someone. So I don't think I'll ever have 100% respect for somebody doing that. It's just how enamored I am seeing the way he is on the mound. And just coming in short relief. He's a closer, right? Just firing, as you said, even Nate Pearson almost firing those 100-mile-an-hour balls and then just getting the job done. You don't need him all game. He's just so clutch, and he has been on every team. But yeah, that's tough when you end up on Wikipedia as somebody's son after a big home run that gets you out of the playoffs. I mean, you kind of don't throw those kind of pitches if you're going to get hit. But then again, he's like, what do you mean? It's 100 miles an hour. That's like, it's pretty rare to hit that speed. So
yeah, it's really hard to hit it, but I think Brasso knew it was coming. I think Chapman almost telegraphed his pitches a little bit. He wasn't comfortable in with his slider, because he threw the slider and Brasso hit it so far it almost left the building in foul territory.
You're the one that was you're talking about the one that was just outside the zone and he still got a piece of it. That's when you knew there's a problem here.
Yeah. And then the pitch after the slider was a fastball right down the middle. Brasso cranked it backwards and straight back, and you know that they just missed it. And then the pitch after was the one it was fastball inside. Brasso almost like he knew where he was going with it, and he just cranked it out.
You know better than I would.
Clutch,
when a guy's throwing 100, you have to guess, right? Like, at that point, you're just essentially playing a guessing game against Chapman. I think that's why I find him so intimidating. You can't really see those pitches coming for the most part.
To give you a real world depiction of it, the 100-mile or the fastball comes in 4.2 feet quicker than the slider.
And do they not come in flashes? I've heard hitters say, like, basically you see a pitcher, you see one ball, and then you see essentially a frame of a ball mid, and then you see the final frame. And sometimes, depending on the speed, that final frame that you actually see it, it's too late, right? And that's where the guessing game at the second frame sometimes comes in. Listen to me trying to break down a hit. But, like, that's what I mean. It's so difficult to sometimes make that connection. You really wonder, in that kind of moment with Brasso, I'm assuming he's just going, okay, Chapman throws 2 pitches, right? Like, and this one's probably either high or low. It's going to have to be a fastball. So good guess. Great guess. You're his father now.
Great guess. And Brasso is clutch. Brasso is clutch, man. He
came out of nowhere.
The game after he got thrown at by Chapman, he hit 2 home runs.
Right.
So this guy, he knows how to lock in when the time is right, and he locked in on this when he got that home run. Respect to the Rays. They said all the right things on the post game interviews, saying that they have moved past it. There was no drama, all this sort of stuff. I personally believe that Aroldis Chapman got off easy. The suspension was actually lifted. Yeah. The MLB said they're doing an investigation pending on witnesses. Okay, do you not have footage? Do you not have footage of the game and you watch the dude throw the ball at this guy's head? What witness do you need?
I've seen the video 5 times.
Suspended?
I'm a witness. I'm a witness, John. Yeah. You're a witness.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Aroldis Chapman, he won't get suspended, but the Rays got their measure of revenge in kicking them out of the playoffs. And final thing on the Rays, we got to talk about that troll video by Ji-Man Choi.
Yes, please bring
Ji-Man
that back
Choi
up.
on Instagram after the win. All the guys are in the dugout and they're blasting the song New York by Alicia Keys, and Ji-Man Choi singing away, and then he turns the camera around to a recycle bin that he just goes ahead and just starts to bang on, because of course they're going up against the Houston Astros. So an excellent troll job by Ji-Man Choi and the Tampa Bay Rays, and this will be the 2nd year in a row that the Rays are going up against the Astros. So I think that the Rays are looking to get their pound of flesh out of the Astros as well, even though they won't say that in the media. Guaranteed on the bulletin board, on the whiteboard, in the locker room, there is a big bullseye target on that Houston Astros logo.
Oh yeah. And that's number one. That's an incredible troll job. Like the absolute, like the creativity there to smash on the cans too. G-Man Choi, welcome to the gentleman's club. Like that was impressive. But what I wanted to say here is envision this, John. The Dodgers beat the Braves, and unfortunately the Houston Astros beat the Rays. I think I'm okay with seeing Dodgers Houston. I really think I'm okay with seeing that, because if the Dodgers don't absolutely beat up on the Astros, that'll be a travesty in I think the North American sport, not just baseball. Because even there's people who aren't even diehard baseball fans that just want to puke at the sight of the Astros. And listening to was it Carlos Correa with his silly comments after they won their last series, saying like, "Oh, who can say anything now?" It's like, everybody, like, you're pieces of garbage. Like, you guys don't really belong.
Yeah, you still cheated.
You literally don't belong in the league. Like you should be playing in some baseball league that doesn't really care, like doesn't matter at this point. You don't really belong in the spotlight. You ruined your opportunity in the spotlight, in my opinion. I'm one of those people like, it's like, well, you want to kick them out of the league? Well, man, they essentially like treated it like a joke. So why don't we treat them like a joke? They don't belong. That's the way it works.
Alex Cora's gone.
It's the way it works. It's the way it works, man. To me, I think I'm not, here for capital punishment or anything, but when it comes down to it, you disrespect the game's going to disrespect you. There's a reason Pete Rose will never be in the Hall of Fame. So how come these guys get to just hang out? I don't get it.
So, speaking of punishment, you said capital punishment. Well, speaking of punishment, what kind of punishment would you give the Tennessee Titans, Ryan?
I'm glad you brought that up here, because we got to move on. Essentially, that's our baseball talk. The Tennessee Titans, John, you're more of an expert than I am on this, but from what I understand, they disrespected and threw caution to the wind and essentially slapped in the face all of the frontline workers and family members of people that have passed away from COVID, and essentially as disrespectful as you can be to a disease and to anybody who suffered from it. They were, because from what I understand, although they had plenty of players testing positive, I don't know the actual number. Not just them, but the rest of the league, I guess, or a ton of teams were aware that they were still holding, practices and essentially getting together while everybody's got COVID. At this point, it was one of these stories that keeps unfolding this week, and I want you to fill me in on the rest. But my first take on it is this not a slap in the face to every single person who's had to deal with COVID?
Well, it's definitely a slap in the face to the NFL and their protocols, and showed exactly how much reverence people had for the NFL and how much belief they had that the NFL was actually going to do anything in regards to punishment. I think it's disrespectful to the virus and disrespectful to people who have suffered with it. The fact that you're acting so frivolously.
Like, they just don't care? Do you not care?
23 players tested positive on the Tennessee Titans.
How many people are on a roster and that would get together to practice?
53.
Okay, just double checking. It's around half. Okay.
Yeah, so around half of the team tested positive for the virus, and they were under strict orders to not gather and not practice, and they did the exact opposite. And it wasn't just the players. It's been reported that it was also members of the coaching staff who were organizing these practices. So it was basically the entire team culture regarding around it. And unfortunately, a reporter has faced more punishment than the actual Tennessee Titans. Ian Rappaport posted photos of these practices, and because the NFL was mad that he didn't ask permission, he's been suspended till October 22nd by his network.
What was the fallout? Can you remind me, John? I think my memory is a little foggy. Back in March, what was the fallout for Rudy Gobert?
Nothing.
But
absolutely
were people
nothing.
Not a little bit upset at the guy? Like he was like the scapegoat for COVID in North American professional sports?
Well, if you're talking about the court of public opinion, he was definitely tried and convicted in the court of public opinion. But in regards to punishment for what he did, or in regards to anything that was handed down to him, the league didn't do anything about him touching everybody's stuff and acting like a fool in regards to the virus. And
but in the end, what's worse? Like these guys, they deserve a little bit of punishment here. Like I know Rudy Gobert kind of got his. I mean, the league was shut down. He had to apologize. He really did seem sincere about it. But he wasn't the only one that was treating COVID like it wasn't a real thing. Although he was the first professional athlete to be a public idiot about it, right? So he got reprimanded. But to me, I'm asking, like, is this not way worse? Is this not a lot worse?
Oh, 1,000,000% worse.
Okay.
1,000,000% worse.
Okay, just morally trying to gauge the compass here. So I just wonder, like, these guys should be really raked over the coals for this one. It should not stop.
Well, from what I've heard, the NFL's protocols, they've set up punishment could include forfeiture of games, forfeiture of draft picks, et
Okay.
cetera, et cetera. But people have looked into that, and apparently under the CBA, I do not believe the NFL can force a team to forfeit a game. So I don't know exactly where that came from, or where Roger Goodell had the idea that he was going to be able to forfeit games on teams. But there needs to be some sort of punishment. And if you're fining coaches hundreds of thousands of dollars for not wearing masks, this organization needs to be fined $20 million for this.
Yeah, I definitely a definitely financial punishment, but I think it's gonna have to be like it's gonna have to hurt the franchise development. Like I want to see draft picks or some sort of the same way another team can be punished. That's normally the way it'll go, right? Draft picks, fines, things of that nature. If anything, people need to lose their jobs for making decisions like this. We're talking like that's what I mean about punishment. Like if we're talking to again just fly in the face of all these issues with like the frontline workers that have spent all this time trying to protect the public, all these people that have died from COVID, all these rules that have been put in place to protect the public. You're lucky that the league is even operating, and then you're gonna go ahead and do this like that. That's just so ignorant. It's actually ignorant. So I don't understand why we're not kind of talking about somebody not losing their job. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, all I can think of is if this was the New England Patriots, they would have blown the entire team up. They would have
You're right.
taken them to the Supreme Court, and they would
I'm
have
not gonna
stripped
argue
to the
that.
owner of his rights. They would have fired Bill Belichick. They would have
You're not even
they
wrong.
would have banned every single player on the team from ever playing in the NFL again. But because it's the stupid Tennessee Titans, no one gives a damn, and they're not going to do anything about it. There might be an investigation, but this will be swept under the rug. If this was the Patriots, they would be the worst team in the world, and everyone would be condemning them.
Yeah, reputation will do that to you, but I honestly don't even think I can disagree with you. I think like we definitely take that reputation to another level, but I will also always side with it's the same with whatever happened last year, the Spygate 2.0. Whoever was filming what, remember it was a whole NFL documentary
the
or whatever.
Browns or something, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. We always, with the Patriots, we're going to take it like 3 levels further. But I always say, well, don't put yourself in that situation. It's almost like if you want to regain trust in a relationship, you have to like act trustworthy. You can't just like keep doing things and then go like, oh, well, it's always bad when you catch me doing stuff. It's like, well, yeah, we catch you doing stuff all the time. So
I found
I
it
can see both
funny.
sides of it, but I don't think I disagree. I feel like if it was the Patriots, this would be like a mountain out of a molehill. But it's like, yeah, your reputation would definitely do that to you.
I find it absolutely hilarious. I know we both subscribe to The Athletic, and I don't know if you saw this headline, but Tennessee has 23 players test positive. They're spreading the virus across the entire league. They're doing all this sorts of crap. And then I see a headline from The Athletic. Is it time to shut the Patriots down for 2 weeks? What the hell?
And trade Nylander.
What the hell?
Trade Nylander too. Right?
Like,
That's almost like the storylines always, they start off one way and then it's like, oh, we don't get enough clicks doing this. And it's like, just throw in a little bit more about the Patriots or William Nylander and we're set. I'm not joking. Like I feel like that's how I would do it.
No, well, it's what it is. I mean, I subscribe to The Athletic because it's less clickbaity, but that was the most clickbait article I've ever seen. I was honest. I was so mad. I posted this, or I commented like a paragraph and a half to the Athletic about it. I was really
the beauty of The Athletic is they actually respond quite timely to those because like it's quite they build their own little community, right? Because you're subscribed, it's very intimate, so you can read an article and be one of like 200 commenters and still get a response. Like that's the beauty. If anybody hasn't chosen The Athletic yet, eventually they might, let's just keep pumping up all these companies. Maybe they'll come give us advertising if we're doing it for free. I'm just joking, but obviously, man, like The Athletic is a great place to hang out.
Right? Job. Forget the advertising.
Well, yeah, the job works too. I'll take that. Before we get out of here, though, with the NFL, big matchups this week. Anything you want to touch on? I don't think I really got enough time to look at the upcoming matchups, so I'll let you take the reins on that. But I think that's our last NFL story before we dip.
In regards, I think the biggest story I have, without getting into all the matchups, and my picks and whatnot, the biggest story I have is: are we going to see Tuesday night football?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's funny.
I have never ever seen a football game from the NFL on Tuesday night. The New England Patriots, if they play Monday night, will become only the third team in NFL history to play back-to-back Monday nights after the Kansas City Chiefs became the second team in history last week to play back-to-back Monday night games. And we're going to see a Tuesday night football game in a world where everything is gone topsy-turvy and weird. I think the biggest key we can take from the NFL is let's just get the season played in whatever manner you have to play it in. If it's a bubble, you got the guys got to go to hotels, you're getting paid millions of dollars. You just saw the NHL do it. The MLB is quarantining for their playoffs. The NBA was just successful at Disney doing the same thing. So NFL, if you want to get it done, you want to get it done right, maybe it's time to take a little bit of a break, put the season on pause for a week, and get everyone's ass in a bubble.
Yeah, I think we said it months ago on one of the pods, like, what can the NFL learn from the MLB way before the NFL even decided to start up? And I think that was one of my major takeaways was, like, I don't like how the MLB has just thrown caution to the wind and just played, you saw what happened to the Marlins, and then the Titans essentially became the Marlins of the NFL. Now, the Titans didn't go ahead and get busted for practicing throughout their week of quarantine. So that's why the Titans essentially are, getting all this hate, because they made a dumb decision, but ultimately I do think a bubble would have solved a lot of these issues. You wouldn't have had the Titans even come down with a lot of these you wouldn't have had 23 players test positive. You might have had one or two, just like we saw in the other bubbles, but that's okay because you're essentially able to handle it. You're on top of it. So I did hear some rumblings that I think it was the NFL was planning on, at a certain point in the season, maybe for playoffs. You can correct me if I'm wrong here. They were aiming at maybe trying to institute a bubble once they got down to a more manageable schedule with less teams. But beyond that, they're kind of stuck operating the same way the MLB did. So I won't be surprised if, just like I believe it went Marlins and then Phillies, right? You could have a football team. I know the Patriots had some, issue with Cam Newton, but you might have another team real soon, just like the Titans, that's got like half of their roster that's kind of sidelined. So even going back to what you said before, this schedule this year is going to be topsy-turvy. You'll have Tuesday night games, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, whenever they can get them in. I have a feeling there's going to be a week 18, a week 19. Those kinds of things have been discussed, right? So that's the risk you run. Not having a bubble it's very similar to the way the MLB operated.
I was just going to bring up, Ryan, I think the most telling thing as to if there will be a week 18 or a week 19 is the fact that the NFL, the Super Bowl is in Tampa. They've booked those hotels for 4 weeks beyond their Super Bowl date.
So that tells you they've already planned for it, which is not stupid. That's very smart, right? Look at again, going back to the MLB, you had teams where you're like, man, we're gonna have to go off of win percentage because some of these guys aren't gonna, even have a third of the games played compared to others. That was at first. I think things, evened out a little more. But you have enough teams like the Titans missing a couple of weeks. You're going to need to, play. But then what happens to teams who kind of are ready for playoffs and sitting around for 3 weeks before playoff? That's already another conversation for down the road because that's a unique circumstance. You don't always get that much time to prepare for playoffs, so it could impact positively or negatively what's going on there.
Yeah, 100%. But that's all I got for the NFL.
Same here, buddy. Same here. I think that's all for sports. We'll get back together real soon. But tomorrow night, you've got the Game 6 between the Lakers and Miami Heat. That's at 7:30. And I believe the Rays and Houston Astros series kicks off tomorrow as well at 7:30. And then the Braves and Dodgers doesn't start till Monday at 8. But that's it. Like, honestly, no hockey. NBA is pretty much done after this. So it's a little bit easier to keep an eye on all those games and enjoy them. When we get back in touch, we'll probably have an answer on the NBA final, and we'll most likely have a lot of excitement to discuss in those two championship series.
Go Rays, go Braves.
Go Rays, go Braves. All right, I'll side with you that. Take care. Have a good one, and we'll chat soon.
Peace.
Peace out. Oh, it lagged there. Peace out. I'm gonna have to edit that. That was the worst piece I've ever. It was like east, but you're good. All right. See you, buddy.
Later, man.
Yeah, I'm talking about that man, Jimmy Butler.